Hi there, my name's Ellie. I am the Communications and Advocacy Manager for the Virginia Nurses Association. And today in this video, I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about how to have successful meetings with your legislators. I have been with the Virginia Nurses Association for going on 7 years now. And I've been involved in state and local level advocacy for 9. So I'm really excited to share some tips with you all today as part of VNA's newest advocacy initiative, our June Nurses Month of Action, in order for you all to have successful meetings with your legislators and to continue to take part in advocacy in Virginia and beyond. Alrighty, so let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So, the very first thing you're going to want to do as far as scheduling meetings with your legislators is, of course, you're going to want to identify who your legislators are. Here in Virginia, we have a really great tool called Who's My Legislator through the Virginia General Assembly. And you just type in Who's My Legislator Virginia into your search internet browser. And usually it's the first link that will pop up. And so you'll need to fill in your address, and then this website will provide you with your local, state, and federal legislators. So it's a really great tool. So if you don't know your legislators, that is going to be your first step to scheduling a meeting with them, is just figuring out who they are. The second step, of course, is going to be connecting with the legislator you would like to meet with. And there are a few different ways you can do this. In the year 2026, I would say the most common way of connecting with the legislator is, of course, emailing or a phone call. So, the best way to connect with your legislator is to look up their General Assembly, if they're state, or their legislative email address. And the legislative email addresses are usually run by legislative staffers, and they are essentially the gatekeepers to the legislators as far as their availability and meeting and connecting with constituents. So you're going to want to reach out via phone or email and just say, hey, I'm a constituent of this legislator. I would love to set up a time to meet about XYZ. If it's just an introductory meeting and you just want to get to know your legislator and say hello, then you would just simply share, I'm looking to just simply have an introductory meeting with this legislator. If there's anything specific that, of course, you'd like to talk about regarding policy or legislation, then you'll want to let them know as you're scheduling the meeting so the legislator can come prepared, right? And we have some additional tips here as well. So typical meetings you can see here are really only last 15 to 30 minutes, and 30 would be on the longer side, and those tend to happen if you have a very policy specific meeting or a meeting about specific legislation that you kind of wanted to talk to the legislator about. But for the most part, they're going to be quite quick meetings. They're going to be about 15 to 20 minutes. And the other thing I feel that's important to point out is the legislators are not always available to meet. But if you're given the opportunity to meet with their legislative staff, that is just as important as of a touch point. Because as I mentioned earlier, these legislative aides are the gatekeepers to the legislators. Not only do they assist in scheduling the meetings for the legislators, but oftentimes they are the ones that have the really comprehensive notes that go into detail about certain pieces of legislation, how the legislator should move forward, who the legislator should talk to about this stuff. So again, if you can't meet with a legislator, meeting with their staff is just as important. So I highly encourage you to continue with the meeting, even if you cannot meet with the legislator themselves. So moving into number 3, you've got your meeting scheduled. Now let's prepare, right? So as I said earlier, if your meeting is not introductory and message, this is really where you're going to want to take some time to do some research. Even if the meeting is introductory, I do encourage you to still do a little bit of research about the legislator you're meeting with. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but learning a bit more about the district that the legislator represents and any legislation in the past couple of years that the legislator has sponsored or supported that you are in favor of, this would be a great time to do some research to come to that meeting a little prepared. Now, if you have a more specific meeting message in mind, this is where you're going to want to take the time to identify your main message. Legislators, like I said, it's going to be a short meeting, so you have to come in kind of prepared with talking points if you're specifically focusing on a policy ask or a legislative initiative. And I highly encourage as well to leave a copy of those talking points behind for the legislators. Additionally, if you are meeting in a group of people, it's typically beneficial to kind of identify meeting roles prior to heading into the meeting. So what that typically looks like is usually there's a team leader, someone who's more comfortable speaking to the legislators and kind of guiding the meeting conversation. So that would be one role. Another role that is pretty common is the scribe or the person that's taking notes about the meeting, what the legislator has said, what the legislator would like some more information on, or perhaps what we can follow up on, that sort of information. And so there doesn't necessarily have to be roles, but it does help you look a little more polished when you come in as a group and you'd like to meet with the legislator to at least kind of have a team leader and a designated scribe, or if you're talking about multiple policy areas, have one person cover one area, one person cover another. So that's just some helpful tips for meeting preparation. So now we're going to go into step 4, which is during the meeting. So for the meetings, we typically recommend arriving like 5 to 10 minutes early for, most any event, just so you can navigate parking, find the office, and arrive with your group on time. If you're in the healthcare profession, we typically encourage lab coats, stethoscopes, nursing badges or buttons, but it's really to your comfort. If you do not want to dress in profession clothing, then we typically say business casual, right? Because it's important to show a little respect to the legislator. They're taking time to meet with you, and so you kind of want to show them that you're appreciative of the time that they're taking and, just present yourself, a little formally. So we're actually going to switch over to another document here that is a little bit more specific about like how this 15 to 20-minute meeting would go. All right, so we walk through the door, we have our roles designated, and we're in the meeting. What happens now? What do we talk about? Well, here are some talking points that are on our June Nurses Month of Action webpage. You can download it or access it for free. It's a PDF. So you'll just want to go to our June Nurses Month of Action webpage. And these are talking points kind of specific to nursing. If you're not a nurse, you can still use them and kind of frame your own talking points and meeting conversation based around this. So, all right, let's go. We get into the meeting. The first thing you're going to want to do is introduce yourself and, of course, everyone in the room. If you're affiliated with VNA or any other nursing or advocacy groups, this is where you're going to want the legislator to know that, or any professional titles that you feel would be relevant to this meeting. After everyone does introductions, you're going to want to thank the legislator or their staff, whoever's meeting with you today, for taking the time to meet. Because again, legislators it's a part-time position, but they kind of have to have that part-time position year-round. So their schedules can be pretty dicey, right? So just starting off on a positive note, just saying, hey, thanks for meeting with us. I'm sure you're pretty busy, and so we really appreciate it. The next thing you're going to want to do is explain why you're meeting. And so in this talking points document, we provided information about VNA as part of our June Nurses Month of Action. So in this scenario, the explanation of why you would be meeting would be, hey, thanks so much for meeting with us today. We're actually here on behalf of the Virginia Nurses Association. It's the oldest professional nursing organization in Virginia. They celebrated their 125th anniversary last year in 2025, and VNA represents the interests of all 151,000 registered and advanced practice nurses in Virginia. VNA is currently holding a Nurses Month of Action in June to educate and empower nurses and healthcare professionals about the importance of advocacy and their roles as change makers. While we won't be discussing policy issues today, we wanted to take the time to get to know you a little more and let you know more about your nurse and nursing student constituents. So again, if you're not meeting specific to VNA stuff, it would simply, you could simply use kind of like that last bullet and just say, we're not going to be discussing too many policy issues today. We simply wanted to have a little introductory meeting to get to know you more and for you to get to know your nursing or healthcare provider constituents more. And so if it was a VNA run meeting, before we get into like the icebreaker, this is kind of where we'd be like, so we're just curious, like, have you heard of VNA before? What's your perception of VNA? What have you heard? If you haven't, that's fine. We'd love to know. But if you're with another organization, you can definitely throw that question in there as well. So now we're going to dive into the bulk of the meeting. And again, these are quick meetings. So, something that the VNA team really likes to do is to ask not only legislators, but most people, what is your connection to nursing, right? Because pretty much everybody has one. So this first bullet here is a fun fact that we like to share, and this number is updated every year as we get the Virginia Department of Health Professions data. So as of 2026, about 1 in every 59 Virginia residents is a nurse. Nurses are the largest healthcare profession in Virginia, the United States, and the world. So imagine the tremendous power of nurses and imagine a world without nurses. That is not a world I would want to live in. So and then we kind of roll into what is your connection to nursing? Most everyone has one, whether it's a family member, a neighbor, or a story of a nurse caring for you or a loved one during difficult times. And so this is where you would allow the legislator to share their story and their connection to nursing a little bit. And then once they finish their response, you'll of course say thank you. And then next, if the legislator, this is where in step 3, where the research part is important, the meeting prep. So as I mentioned, you're gonna want to see if the legislator has supported any legislation, any budget initiatives in the past that you have been in support of. And I would encourage having them as bullet points, like the specific legislation and what it did, maybe the year that it was enacted, and say, hey, I know you advocated for this, I know you supported this, and I just wanted to say thank you. And so, really letting the legislator know, like, I'm paying attention to what you're doing and I'm appreciative of it. So, depending on how long that little section takes, because it could be some Q&A, it could be some just a little chatting about maybe what the legislator wants to do further with their legislative initiatives in the coming year, building off of, the legislation that they already passed. So after that, we've developed some additional questions that you can ask to kind of keep the conversation going. And again, these are very introductory level meeting questions. So this is just to learn a bit more about the legislator, their district, their initiatives, right? And so, depending on how much time you have left in the meeting, you're obviously not going to get to all these questions. You're going to probably pick like 3 to 5 of your favorites. And, choosing which 3 to 5 is probably going to be dependent on what you spoke about in the last bullet. So, if there's any legislation that the legislator kind of wants to expand on, is passionate about, what they can expect next. So I'm just going to read off the questions really quickly. What issues do you think are getting overlooked right now? What concerns are you hearing the most from constituents? What kinds of constituent input are most useful to you? What makes advocacy efforts effective from your perspective as a legislator? What are the biggest barriers to getting legislation passed? How much influence do agencies or local governments have? How do local concerns differ from statewide concerns? What's the best way to share information or concerns with your staff? What information would help lawmakers better understand nursing issues? And lastly, what do you enjoy most about representing the district? So you can see there are some nursing specific questions, but again, this is more so an introductory level meeting talking points. So those are some additional questions you could ask with the remaining time. And then, of course, at the end of the meeting, wrap up is important as well. So you're going to want to thank the legislator or their staff again for taking the time to meet with you today and for sponsoring any legislation. Something you could share verbatim is we're so appreciative that you took the time to speak with your nursing constituents and to learn more about the nursing profession in Virginia. If you have any leave behind materials, any talking points about legislation, maybe your organization or advocacy efforts, or maybe information about your profession and what you do, you'll want to leave that behind with the team and let them know how they can get in touch with you. Sometimes legislators will reach out to nurses, healthcare professionals, other experts in different areas to help advise on legislation, help enact legislation. So this is a really important touch point if you would like to be involved and kind of help be a content expert on nursing for this legislator. So definitely, if you're comfortable, share how they can connect with you. Additionally, we always encourage a photo op at the end just to make it fun for you and, of course, the legislator, and you can share it on social media. And hopefully, the legislator will as well. But that is totally up to you and your comfort level. You do not have to take a photo if you're not comfortable with it. Alrighty, and then of course, the last thing you're going to want to do is ask the legislator how to stay connected as a constituent and thank them one last time. So, a lot of legislators will typically have an electronic newsletter or an email sign up that you can use to stay connected and get regular updates on the district and any events that the legislator has, any news stories, anything like that. So definitely ask the legislator how to stay connected and thank them one last time. Alrighty, I want to go back to this other document and talk about some additional scenarios. I know I would say the number one question I get asked, especially from folks that are new to advocacy, is what do I say when the legislator asks me a question and I don't know the answer? That's probably the most asked question that I get. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit and point you out to this bullet right here. And so, what I always tell people, if a legislator asks you something and you don't know the answer, you do not have to lie. In fact, honesty is the best policy in this situation. And I myself use this all the time. And I say, you know what? That's a great question. I don't actually know the answer, but I'd be happy to get in touch with the right people and get you that information as soon as I can. What other information could I possibly help provide you to help answer that question while I am getting in touch with those people. So just kind of keeping the ball rolling. Like you are not a Google search engine, you're not an AI, you're not a computer, you're not going to know everything, and that is okay. And I think the other thing to remember in these situations too is the legislators do not know everything. I think there are no nurses in the Virginia State General Assembly. I believe we have a pharmacist and maybe a pediatrician. So the other thing to think about is these legislators are, passing legislation that affects nurses, but they're not nurses themselves. So it is okay to not know an answer to a question. You simply say, that's a great question. I don't actually know the answer, but I'd be happy to get that information to you. The other thing I wanted to point out in this area specifically is the local connection. So if you know your legislator's family or you're close friends with a friend of a legislator, that's always something that's really meaningful to point out as well, because it gives you a little bit of personal leverage with that legislator and it makes them pay attention a little bit more. Like, oh my goodness, okay, this person knows one of my parents, or this person went to high school with my best friend. So I really need to tune in, pay attention to what they have to say. So those are just some other things to sort of consider in your meeting. It is absolutely not imperative that you have a local connection with your legislator. And then the other thing I kind of wanted to circle back on, if your meeting is not introductory in nature, if it's specific to policy or legislation, we always like to end with what we call a hard ask, and that's one where you ask a kind of a point blank yes or no question. Can we count on your support for this legislation? Will you vote in favor of this legislation? And so it's a question that requires a very clear yes or no response. Now, I will say a lot of times the legislators will respond to that question in turn and be like, I'm not sure. I need to look into this more and do some more research. And if they say that, that is an important moment for you to kind of tune in and realize, okay, I'm going to need to continue to connect with this legislator regularly and provide them with evidence-based practice, accurate data relevant to this legislation, and the reason why supporting this legislation is so important. So even if you have a hard ask and they kind of give you a soft answer, that's okay. It means you can work on getting that legislator to supporting your initiative wherever it is. And even if they are not supportive, again, a lot of times you're the content subject matter expert. So just being very polite in your answer and being like, I totally understand. I would love to continue to have a relationship with you and maybe talk about how we can work on this legislation to help improve healthcare or nursing in Virginia. And then just continuing to make those touch points and say, hey, here's some data about that legislation we talked about. Here's some personal narratives from nurses in the workplace that are experiencing XYZ. And so those are just some additional tips that I wanted to point out. And then after the meeting, of course, you're going to want to do a little debrief with your team, write down any notes, any impressions. If you need to do any follow-up on any action items, for example, any questions that you didn't know that the legislator asked, you're going to want to kind of organize that and figure out, okay, what do we need to do next? Do I need to send data about this? Do we need to sign up for the legislator's newsletter? And then, of course, if you're going on behalf of a larger organization or entity, you're going to want to share that kind of meeting debrief with them and let them know how it went. But that is, in a nutshell, how to meet with your legislators. And again, this was kind of more of a state local focus, but this applies at the federal level as well. I would say the meeting content and length is going to be very similar. Federal legislators might have a bit of a differing availability compared to state and local legislatures. Something else to keep in mind is Congress kind of runs a bit different to the Virginia General Assembly session. So when the Virginia General Assembly session is in session, the federal Congress is not necessarily always in session. So that's just something to think about. And then, of course, the other thing I just wanted to throw out there is as far as finding a place to meet with your legislators, typically they have two offices. They have an office at the Capitol, so whether that's in Richmond or DC, and then they have an office in their district. If for whatever reason meeting at an office is not available, VNA typically encourages finding a third party public space. So typically a public library has meeting rooms that you can utilize, or like an internet cafe or something very neutral, you know. So yeah, those are just some additional tips. I'm going to put my contact information up at the end of this video. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. But I have had a great time speaking with you all today, and I hope you have a great time meeting with your legislators and that this information was useful. And I really hope that you plan to join us for our June Nurses Month of Action. So thank you all so much for taking the time to learn a bit more about how to meet with your legislators.